We are live. Let me see if we are live on Instagram. But we are here discussing the post game of the K-State Army game. K-State Wildcats are now 1-2, and I have the wonderful Joe Tillery here to give us his Cats reaction to this horrible events that we had to experience on Saturday. From a fan, I was there, and it's really frustrating when the best thing that you have seen, that I have seen this season, is a drone show and a pregame parachute jumpers onto the K-State field. That has been the most exciting thing I have seen all season. Joe, how are you doing after this loss?
Well, I've had better weekends, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So I was out in Western Kansas dove hunting for this one, so I missed the first half video-wise, I was listening to it on the radio, love Wyatt and all he does. Unfortunately, it didn't sound any better on the air, on the radio, than it did watching it on the TV. And we got back just in time for me to watch the worst parts of the football game, so I got to see the last 4 minutes of the game.
Oh, man.
But listen to it on the radio, and it's just mistake after mistake after mistake. I mean, you can make plays, you can do all this stuff, but not to overarch everything, but like this team is just bad right now. Like there's not a great takeaway as of things are really great, and we're just doing this wrong, this wrong. We need to get this guy healthy. There's just a fundamental issue with Kansas State football right now, and I haven't really necessarily reflected on it too much. I need to go back and watch film. Don't really want to be honest with you, but yeah, it was not a good weekend. We pretty much had our highlights as anywhere away from the gridiron was kind of my weekend there, trying to not watch the Chiefs lose, the Cats lose. The Royals won a couple games. That was good, but it was not a highlight weekend in the Tillery household.
No, I feel the same. I had that feeling of it's not often you get a Chiefs loss and then a Cats loss, and but I was worried. I was scared. Watching the game, I have never experienced, and I've sat in these football seats for over 30 years, and I have never seen a football game. Now, I remember when we played Navy and when we lost that bowl game, but this is the same style of offense, but we shouldn't have been confused by it. It was like watching or playing a video game with my kids, and they have found a glitch code, and or back in the day in Techno Bowl when someone had Bo Jackson, where you couldn't stop it. You knew you couldn't stop it. You knew as soon as they had the ball that second half, what is going on? I mean, what is going on it was constant. And then to kind of give a little bit of a recap, they scored before half, and that was super disappointing because I thought, okay, you know what? We're not destroying these guys. We're not bullying these guys, but we're up enough that this seems like it's going to go our way. And that touchdown scared the heck out of me. And last game we were able to own the third quarter, but this time they put together a 14-play, 89-yard drive, and you just started seeing, oh no. Yeah, we got a punt or kickoff return, which I don't think we've done since 2021. We got a kickoff return, and it was what Kleiman said, the worst thing that could possibly happen to us. Our defense goes right back on the field.
Yeah, the game as a whole almost felt comical. Like any type of momentum you'd built, any type of good thing that would happen would be, reversed with two bad things right after. And it's kind of crazy. You're sitting in a glass house vibe of us complaining about having a 99-yard touchdown to the house, but that's a real reality. I mean, everybody's gassed. They just got off the field after being out there for 15 minutes. The offense hasn't run a play beyond the 2-point conversion in 45 minutes of real-time football. But the game, when you look at the box score, looks like a Madden game. It doesn't look like a real football game.
Yeah.
When you look through this, the time of possession, Army had 40 minutes to our 19 and a half. They were 6 for 7 on fourth down. That does not happen in power conference football, let alone at a disadvantage where you're playing a school like Army, who, granted, the triple option is awful to prep for, awful to stop. But you have enough athletes, one, that are making enough money, two, that are highly enough recruited guys, guys that have been in college football for a long time. The fundamental issues of the game were there. Like, your offensive line cannot be getting dominated by teams like North Dakota and teams like Army. I understand if you're going up against Utah, if you're going up against Iowa State, where you're going to have
Yeah.
multiple guys hear their name in the draft. Realistically, the best player in some of these smaller schools might transfer, go to a different school, and that's kind of the next step for them. But you should be fundamentally better than them in the trenches on both sides of the football, and that was not the case. You couldn't stop the run, and unfortunately enough, and I've seen a lot of people, kind of built on the last performance to this one, but Avery Johnson threw the football incredibly well in this game. I mean, there's so many highlight plays, like the touchdown to Tibbs down the sideline was a rope, a beautiful
Dime.
shot down the field. Same thing on that hit that jarred out. We got bailed out a little bit because I did think that was a fumble, that last drive of the game. But he's playing good football, and nobody else around him is helping out. And I'm not trying to say he's been the perfect player, but you can look at Matt Wells and say, well, he's not doing the XYZ thing. The offensive line is struggling to move Army or North Dakota off the line of scrimmage. There's not many plays you can call in that set other than Avery, scramble around for 6 seconds, throw it at somebody on the field, hope it works out. Defense, just try to tackle somebody in the middle of the field. We'll get off the field. Unfortunately, that was never the case, and it was really, really, really painful to watch, to say the least.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, absolutely. Painful. Fitz said it best, death by 1,000 cuts. Undisciplined on kickoff. That swib,
yeah,
or onside that happened. I've never seen that before, and for it to bounce perfectly off the leg, the calf, and go directly back to Army, it was the death. It was the nail in the coffin, because I instantly, with 4 minutes left, I started saying in my section, I'm like, we have to let them score. We have to let them into the end zone, because they are able to drain this clock. It was the Bill Snyder effect that I grew up with, that I was seeing in reverse happening to us. And I wonder if there's a little bit of that we have missed at K-State with Kleiman.
It's funny how fast it changes, because, even just looking back 2 years ago, 2022, you're sitting atop the Big 12, you win the league, things are looking incredible. You land Avery Johnson, a couple years down the road, he's going to take over for Will Howard. Obviously, kicked it up 2024, win the bowl game going to 2025, or excuse me, vice versa. Start the bowl game in 23, play 24, now in 2025. Things are rolling momentum-wise. How fast the world changes in an instant is insane. Because I'm sitting there thinking, all right, Chris Kleiman's leading this team in the college football playoff. They've got the right guys in the right positions. This team is destined for something. We're all building in 2025. Now we're at the point where we're sitting at 1-2. And I know if you want to go, positive, I don't think there's a lot of that right now in K-State's fan base, full disclosure. But if you want to go to the positive outlook, you're 0-1 in conference play. You could still, you go out, you smack Arizona. I don't know that that's going to happen, but you get back to 1-1, you see what you have from there. But the reality is, you're losing the total yardage, you're losing time of possession, you're losing the turnover battle. You're not doing this stuff against teams that are going to be college football playoff contenders or top 25 teams. You're doing this against guys that played at high schools where I might have seen the football field. And that is a low, low bar. Not to throw those guys on the bus, because they truly did have the better football team, which is insane to say as a 19-point favorite, 18-point favorite, whatever it worked out to be. But yeah, there's some issues, and I don't know where they go necessarily from here. But you thought you had it figured out with Chris Kleiman. You thought you had the right guys. You thought you had this, this, and this. Something fundamentally is wrong. I don't think it's a talent issue. I think it's more of a heart, passion, drive issue. But changes do need to happen in some sense. And it's just a question of what happens next.
Well, I think that's the question that I kind of want to land here is, how bad could it be? How bad could it get if we don't start winning some games? Is this a situation where we're seeing potentially some dark years coming? Like you said, it can flip, but what are you worried about?
I think that's a great question. And this will be the optimism in me, because that's just that's just the vibe I go sometimes. But The darkest the day will get, in my opinion, would be this season. Because hear me out on this one. The way I've seen it, and I've always seen it this way, I think it will always be this way, is that the end goal for Kansas State football and life after Chris Kleiman is to get Colin Klein back on the sidelines. That's not his OC. He's going to be as a head coach one day here in Manhattan. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when in my mind.
All right.
And the way Chris Kleiman is maybe not, I don't want to say behaved himself because he's a great dude. Love him. All his contributions to K State I think should be remembered highly. But the next steps are fundamentally laid out for us where we're going. I don't think Chris Klein will ever be fired. I think he'd much rather retire. He's close with Gene Taylor than he would put himself in that position. But say you go like 7-5 this season. Say you make a bowl game at 6-6. I think he'll find a way to scrape 8 wins because that's kind of just what Kleiman does. But truly, you're looking at a spot where you could lose Avery Johnson, you might lose Dylan Edwards, you might lose Lincoln Cure. Like retention will be questioned. But the darkest I see Kansas State's football program getting is this season because truly there's a gate waiting for you. And it's the best way to save this roster, to retain this roster, if it goes down that path. I'm not saying that you couldn't finish out with 9 wins or something here, but say you're at that 6-6 mark, they'll start asking questions. They'll start looking around. I think Chris Kleiman does see the writing on the wall. He knows that he's not a young coach anymore. But when that time happens, and if you go 6-6, I think it happens this season. I think Kleiman would step away, and Gene Taylor would go after Colin Klein, and that would save your roster in terms of a retention standpoint. And you roll the dice there. I know some people are mixed feelings about that, but I truly do think that the end goal for Kansas State football in the next year, maybe 2 years, and that's even pushing it a little bit, is Colin Klein wearing that visor on the sidelines again here soon.
Well, I don't know how. I mean, that does sound great in many ways, but at the same time, I feel for this team. I'm a Kleiman fan. I really just felt at this last game I felt bad for the players. I felt bad for the situation that they were in, for how many plays being on that field. And I believe the time of possession, as you said, in the second half was something like 26 minutes to like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And it would really be a sad thing to lose Kleiman and see a changeover. But if that's what if that's what we have to do, and that's the changes we have to make, obviously cats forever. But I'm not angry at Kleiman right now. I think he's still the right guy for that locker room.
I agree with you. I don't mean to put that out there and say that it's going to happen. Like, I'm a Chris Kleiman believer. I think he's a phenomenal football coach. Like, he's a good man. He's a good leader, good representative of Kansas State. He's the right guy for a lot of those dudes, and he's managed to create stability in a time in college football where there isn't much stability anywhere. But I do think that when that happens, because, we're not talking about 5 years. It's more like 1 to 2 years in my mind. Not necessarily that he's going to go to a different program. I think the guy is kind of at the point where he wants to spend some more time with his family, wants to get on the tail end of this whole NIL thing. Nobody really likes it that much other than some of the players. But it's at a point where I think that in that question of how dark will it get, I think the darkest it gets is that Kleiman retires and then Colin Klein steps in. I don't see it getting darker than that. Like, that's kind of the blanket that I would set the bar at. Like, and I don't think it gets worse than that. So it's one of those where it's going to be a sad day watching him step away or whatever happens next. If he coaches another 2-3 years, that's great. It means he found some more success, continued this thing in the right way. But at worst, I think you're looking at a coaching change, not firing. I think it has to be retired. Kleiman is not going to get fired. That's just not the way you end things with Chris Kleiman, the way he's been at Kansas State, in my opinion. But I do think the darkest thing you get is a coaching search. And then I think the answer is the first call you make, and that's Colin Klein.
Well, it could get darker, and I'm thinking about it right now, and it's losing to KU this year. And I'm all in on 17 in a row. I'm pot heavy on this one, but we got some time. We got some time to turn this around. Joe, thank you so much again. Your talents are rising, and everybody, please go follow Joe Tillery on Instagram. Most importantly, follow him on YouTube. His content is fantastic. His takes are unique, and the guy loves football, but he loves basketball. And It's not basketball season yet. We're not getting crazy right now. We're not talking about basketball yet. But go follow this gentleman and give him some support.
Man, I appreciate that. I love you. Thank you always for having me on. Getting to meet you and interact with you has always been cool. So anytime you want to do this, just give me a shout.
Thanks, Joe.
Anytime, man.
Bye.
Bye bye.